I'm here because I am a roaring lion crying out righteousness. I want to bring up an interview that Dana Bash had this past weekend with Vivek Ramaswamy. And she, being an advocate, if you will, an apologist for so-called black people, now they're not black, they're Hamites, she tried to corner him. And there are certain areas regarding his statements regarding black people he did not back away from. I'm going to let the engineer bring it up. Mr. Engineer, could you bring that segment up? And let's just listen to what he is saying in terms of racial relations here in America.
Presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy, thank you so much for joining me this morning, sir. I want to start with what I began the program with, which is this racist shooter killing 3 black people in Jacksonville yesterday. What is your reaction to the shooting?
It is such a tragedy, and my heart goes out to those families. This should not be happening in the United States of America, and it is wrong. The reality is we have a mental health epidemic in this country. There are reports that this particular individual, the perpetrator, was indeed evaluated for mental health deficiencies as well. And I think we need to have the courage in this country to bring back a practice of putting back psychiatrically ill people who pose a risk to their communities into psychiatric institutions, not just drugging them up, but faith-based approaches and other approaches that fill our longing for purpose and meaning in this country. I think it is just a shame that we even have mass shootings like this, be it the one that happened in Florida, be it the recent one, the Nashville shooter in a Christian school, killing 6 in a school. We have to address that mental health epidemic, and we need leaders with the courage to do it. But my heart goes out to those families, and I hope something like this never happens again.
Mental health is one aspect of these shootings, and apparently, and we're still learning a lot about what happened, the facts are still coming out. Also, this was very much apparently racially motivated. The sheriff there said point blank that this shooter had manifestos coming, 3 manifestos, and said specifically that he went to this dollar store with the intent of killing black people.
I think that is heinous and deserves to be called out for what it is. The reality is we've created such a racialized culture in this country in the last several years that right as the last few burning embers of racism were burning out, we have a culture in this country largely created by media and establishment and universities and politicians that throw kerosene on that racism. And I can think of no better way to fuel racism in this country.
What he is saying is absolutely true. This is absolutely true, that racism as we understood it from the Bull Connor, if you will, Martin King, if you must, George Wallace racism, as whatever that was, Jim Crow, was really dying out. It really was. I'm old enough to remember, and I will not lie to you, but Barack Hussein, the long-legged Mac Daddy Obama, brought it back, and now you've got a bunch of people, such as in the media, such as Dana Bash, MSNBC, and all these other liberals that are now pouring gasoline on what would have been died out racism. And now it's worse today than it ever was. I've lived long enough to see it from both sides now. And what he is saying here is absolutely true. Go ahead, Mr. Engineer.
Than to take something away from other people on the basis of their skin color. I've been saying that for years. And I think that is driving, sadly, a new wave of anti-black and anti-Hispanic racism in this country. I think the right way forward is if we want to stop hate and discrimination on the basis of race, let's stop discriminating on the basis of race and see what unites us as Americans, because I do not think this kind of racial division and any division is good for us as the United States.
I believe that there are a lot of people of color in this country who don't think it was just lasting embers of racism, but that a lot more work had to be done, particularly given the history of the systemic racism in this country with slavery and beyond. I want to ask you about a comment that you made about white supremacy in Iowa on Friday.
I've never once encountered that yet. I'm sure the boogeyman white supremacist exists somewhere in America. I've just never met him. Never seen one. Never met one in my life, right? Maybe I'll meet a unicorn sooner, and maybe those exist too.
So just because somebody hasn't encountered one doesn't mean that the notion of white supremacy doesn't exist as a threat in America. What do you think goes through the minds of the families of the 3 victims in yesterday's shooting when they hear you say that white supremacy is basically a fantasy?
I'm sure they're grieving for their loss, and I don't want to politicize those victims, Dana. This is a very sensitive situation where we should have nothing but foremost respect for those victims and not bring them into partisan politics. But I was responding to a question where someone asked me, what racism have I experienced in recent years? And I answered honestly, most of that racism has come from the modern left. It's happening during the course of this campaign. Kara Swisher calling me Ramaswamy the other day and reveling in making twists of my last name. People effectively reducing me to the color of my skin and my attributes. That comes today from the modern left. But the reality is,
do you
this is
acknowledge,
part of
though,
a
that
dogma
white
in this country.
supremacy does still exist in the United States?
I acknowledge that all forms of racial animus.
I say this, and I'm sure the zillion people disagree with me. The most racist people on the planet today are black people. And because black people are also racist, the response to that racism is racism coming from other races. I've been black all my life. I tell you the absolute truth. I will not lie to you. I have never seen anybody as racist in their dreams. Black people sleep racism. They breathe it. And black people are racist for several reasons. One is that they're obvious because of their skin color, so it's hard for them to try to be somebody else in terms of a different race. That's number one, but not primarily. But the other thing, racism is profitable. Black people make money. It's a cottage industry. Black politicians become black politicians not because of policies that they put forward. They become politicians because they know how to fan the flames of racism. Look at Al Sharpton. I mean, here's one of the dumbest dodo birds. Listen, a bag of rocks is smarter than Al Sharpton, except he knows how to play the race card. Ben Crump, he's tie-tongue. Now, I'm not against anybody who's born with a spiritual speaking defect. That's not my issue. I don't want to, disparage anybody who's speaking. The boy can't even talk, but he knows how to fan the flames of racism. And then here comes the media. The media needs black people. It's a money-making, and black people make money off of racism like the Jews make money off of banking. And that's the absolute truth. And black people and they have discovered there's money in this, there's prestige in this, there's fame in this. And then you got people, two of the biggest whores on the planet today. One is named Beyonce and the other's named Jay-Z. That these are the two biggest whores because they are being pimped. They are being put forward and to destroy the mindset and set an image out for black people that's based on racism. But I have to tell you, it is the Jews that have turned into the iceberg slim pimp, and they are pimping Jay-Z and pimping and giving them a life that looks like a life full of fame and power. Black people make money from racism. And if there wasn't money in it, we wouldn't have racism today. But the other thing is, other people get sick and tired of, I just showed you a young boy, 5 years old, cussing like a sailor. Listen, the media makes money off of it. Black people make money for, now they're not black, they're Hamites. But I'm going to tell you something. You can hate me up and down Main Street, but I will not lie to you. If black people weren't racist, racism in America would go away. White people are willing to live their lives in another track. The other thing is that no matter, listen, black people are racist against one another. They got high, yellow, black. Listen, you're going to find evil people doing evil things. For instance, you look at the young boy that went and shot up the school up in Sandy Hook, up in Connecticut, and killed all those young babies. Or Uvalde. That wasn't racial, or at least they didn't make it racial, mainly because they were Hispanics, and the fellow was Japheth. Al Sharpton and Ben Crump went down there, but these Latinos wouldn't have nothing to do with them. They're just evil people in the world. They just, in occasionally a white will go kill a black, or shoot a black dollar store, shoot a black church. But this just happened. It's a part of fallen human nature, what happened with Adam and Eve in the garden. Sin is out there running rampant. The sin is racism. But black people, I'm going to tell you something. You ain't seen no racist. Let me tell you something. A Ku Klux Klan, flag, cross burning, hood wearing, tattoo wearing Ku Klux Klan of the Grand Dragon of Grand Dragons will have to wake up early in the morning to be as racist as the average black person sitting at a secretary's desk in an office or working as a worker on a building. Black people are working as a bus driver. The Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan would have to take classes to be as racist as black people. I say that as a so-called black man. I've lived around them all my life. And I'm going to tell you something. And the media loves it. They love it. It brings eyeballs. It gets ratings. They can then sell products. If you look at black media, liberal television, they got more black athletes selling medicine, selling, what they selling? Got that boy down there play that ball with Miami Heat, selling mattresses. They got Shaq selling cartridges. They got, I mean, it is sick. It is nothing but pimping and money making and racism gone amok, everywhere you look. Black people making money off of racism. And so as a result of it, there'll be some immediate responses. But as I said before, the Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan will have to take lessons to be as racist as the average black high school student going to Martin Luther King Jr. High School here in New York City. Go ahead, Mr. Engineer.
Exist in the United States, including fringe branches. I mean, that's clearly what was at the head of this mentally deranged individual responsible for this shooting, yes. But I think there are many forms of mental derangement that cause us to see one another on the basis of our skin color and our attributes. And I think what we need to revive, Dana, and it's my job as the leader, hopefully as the next president, to do this, to revive our doctrine of e pluribus unum. Not just celebrating our diversity and our skin-deep attributes, but celebrating what unites us across that diversity. That's what we've forgotten in the United States of America. Our true strength is the set of ideals that unite us. That's my job to revive as our next president. And I think that the next generation in particular is so starved for that. Starved for commonality, starved for a nation that is unified, bigger than the sum of its parts. That's what we need to recreate in this country. And to those who say the remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination, I say no. The right remedy is actually abandoning all discrimination and moving forward with colorblind meritocracy in the United States of America.
You took it to another level on Friday. In addition to the comment we played, you took issue with comments from Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. She reportedly said, quote, "We don't need any more brown faces that don't want to be a brown voice." About that, you said, "These are the words of the modern grand wizards of the modern KKK." You know, I'm sure, the KKK was responsible for more than a century's worth of horrific lynchings, rapes, murders of black people. How in any way are the views you're talking about comparable to the views and atrocities committed by the KKK?
What I said is the Grand Wizards of the KKK would be proud of what they would hear her say, because there's nothing more racist than saying that your skin color predicts something about the content of your viewpoints or your ideas.
You didn't just say they would be proud. You said these are the words of the modern Grand Wizards of the modern KKK.
It is the same spirit. You're right about that, Dana. I think it is the same spirit to say that I can look at you and based on just your skin color, that I know something about the content of your character, that I know something about the content of the viewpoints you're allowed to express. For Ayanna Pressley to tell me that because of my skin color, I can't express my views, that is wrong. It is divisive. It is driving hate in this country. This is dividing our country to a breaking point.
That is a debate that is based on nonviolent discussion. That you just said you're using rhetoric, which she said she's using rhetoric. That's one thing, and another thing is to say that she represents and she is a modern version of a KKK, which, as you know, was dedicated to the subjugation and violence against black people. How on earth is she a modern grand wizard of that kind of organization?
Let's be intellectually honest and get to the heart of what this debate ought to be about. There is a worldview that says that the remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination, that if you're black or brown, you have to have a particular point of view. That's from Ibram Kendi. That's from Ayanna Pressley, the people I quoted in my speech yesterday.
But can you have an intellectually honest conversation when you accuse her of being a grand wizard of the KKK? Can you have that intellectually honest discussion with that kind of rhetoric?
Yes, I can, Dana, because the point I'm highlighting is that even the people who, in good spirit, we all agree that the KKK was an awful organization that is a toxic stain in our national history. So given that we can start from that point of agreement, now that allows us to say, well, who actually sounds more like that organization today? The people who are calling for more.
Enough of that. Here's what I want to do. It is important for us to understand the dilemma of where we are, and racism is only going to get worse. In fact, it is not going to be resolved by politicians. And it's not going to be resolved by media. They have too much to gain, and they really don't care about the deaths or the suffering or the ignorance that's being perpetrated. Even the universities have a stake in promoting racism. And black people have found themselves at the industry that they're, I may use the term that Jews are good at banking, and they are. They're good at banking, they're good at lawyers, and they're good. Black people are good at racism. They're just how they make their money. And the other thing is that I wrote it on my Facebook page the other day that were I to say to a MAGA person, listen, Donald Trump is the biggest liar, con man, grifter, servant of Satan, pathological. The man should be in a straitjacket. The MAGA people's response to me is that he's the best president America has ever had. That is an insult to God himself. That Donald Trump is the best president of America. And then they also say that God Almighty sent Donald Trump to save America from itself. That's pretty sick. That is pretty sick. But and as sick as that is, and it is a form of cancer of spirituality, a cancer of reality that MAGA people are enduring. And many of them know better. They know better, but that's their response to the structured racism that goes on in the media and goes on with black people. That is their response. Send Donald Trump to stamp out this racism. And that's why they say it. Were black people, if you could somehow or another do a cleansing of the racism that started with people like Dr. King, and not that he started racism, but in that era of civil rights where you can cash in on using racism, get a Nobel Prize, make plenty of money, get your name in the newspaper, make plenty, become a very powerful person, where you to go back and and remove all of that and just let America move forward under the ideas of Booker T. Washington, you would absolutely positively discover that that Donald Trump would have never become president because they would have no need for him. But with the way that racism is promoted and applauded and publicized, white people's defensive response, Tribulation Trump is white people's defensive response to black people's offensive racism. Now, I say that. I've been black all my life. I have nothing. I've been a pastor for 43 years. I live in Harlem. The only person that loves black people, now they're not black, they're Hamites. The only person that loves them more than I is the Lord Jesus Christ. And I tell them the truth, but I've been living around them. I've lived with black people on the plantation in North Carolina where we picked cotton, crop tobacco, and said, yes, sir, to Mr. Billy. I've lived with him. I graduated from a segregated school and sat up in the balcony in a segregated movie theater there in Red Springs, North Carolina. I drank from a colored water fountain. I've lived with black people in prison, some of the worst prisons in America, Union Correctional Facility in Rayford, Florida. I have been beaten and kicked and left for dead by the Miami Beach police officer who arrested me one night and beat the living daylights. So he put me in the hospital there in Florida, in Miami Beach, for 2 weeks with broken ribs, broken teeth, left for dead. If you want to talk about racism, I've lived in Harlem for the past 43 years. You don't know nothing about, there's nobody knows more about racism than I do. And I want to tell you something. Black people are the worst, most corrupted, hustling race people you're going to find anywhere on the planet. And were it not for them, Trump would not be president. I can tell you that. Now, you can do with it what you want. And it ain't going to change because it's just too much money to be made. Black people are getting, and they can become mayors. They can get the title of mayor, get the title of congressman. All they got to do is cry racism. And they get voted for. And so enough black people to vote them in. And so that's where you need to understand what needs to happen.